Attention, aspiring wealth builders. Robert Kiyosaki, the brilliant mind behind the groundbreaking book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, reveals the hidden science of money that schools conveniently forget to teach us. If you're from a middle-class background like yours truly, chances are your parents inadvertently passed down outdated financial wisdom. But fear not. In this video, I'll dissect Kiyosaki's insights, debunk myths, and share the secrets to breaking free from the poverty cycle. Stay tuned for a detailed summary of all 7 key principles. But wait, drop a comment saying riches are made by thinking, and I'll give it a heart. 'Cause guess what? I believe in your journey to riches. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of future millionaires. Lesson 1. The rich don't work for money. The poor and middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. Growing up, Robert Kiyosaki went to the same school as the rich kids, simply because he lived on a different side of the street. Being poor in a school filled with affluent students made him seek an answer to the question, how do I make money? His best friend Mike was also poor, and so a friendship was struck between the two. The two spent an entire morning one Saturday brainstorming all the ways they could make money. Their first project wasn't a success, nor was it legal. They decided to cast nickels out of lead to make money, literally. With a quick explanation of the laws of counterfeiting from Robert Kiyosaki's Poor Dad, the pair went back to the drawing board. Robert Kiyosaki's Poor Dad suggested that the two learn how to make money from Mike's dad, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad. Poor Dad had heard from his banker how good the rich dad is at making money. Mike arranged a meeting time and the two began their lessons. Robert Kiyosaki arrived at 8 o'clock sharp for his meeting with Mike's dad. When the meeting began, the rich dad told the two that he'd be happy to teach them but won't be doing it in a classroom style. He proposed that the two boys work for him so that he can teach them faster. The two weren't allowed to ask questions about the deal. And so the first lesson was learned. Opportunities are fleeting, so you need to jump on them when they arrive. He offered to pay Robert and Mike 10 cents an hour for 3 hours every Saturday. After a couple of weeks doing excruciatingly boring work, Robert told Mike that he wanted to quit. This response is what Mike's dad was hoping for. Before his meeting with his rich dad, Robert Kiyosaki's Poor Dad told him to demand what he deserves, at least 25 cents an hour, and to quit his job immediately if he didn't get a raise. Robert went to meet with his rich dad but was forced to wait 60 minutes longer than expected, which infuriated him. Robert felt that his rich dad hadn't kept his end of the bargain of teaching him, and that he was just trying to exploit him by making him work for him. His rich dad noticed that Robert had sounded like his employees after only 1 month. Rich Dad insisted that he was teaching Robert, but in a way that life teaches, not in the way that school does. The most effective way to learn is by doing, though most people consume education from books, which is the least effective way. The main lesson he taught in the office that day was that Robert could either end up like his employees who blame others for his problems, or he could take another path and become a wealthy man. Rich Dad had suggested that the two boys find a new way to make money outside of working for someone else. Lesson 1. The poor and middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. Rich Dad also shared how happy he was that Robert Kiyosaki got angry. He said, "Anger is a big part of the formula. For passion is anger and love combined. Fear is what controls employees that causes them to exploit themselves." If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so as well. Together, you can help us reach 20,000 subscribers. I can count on your support. If you've already subscribed, please leave a comment stating that you have done so. Thank you. Now that you have, let's move on. Rich Dad continued. It's fear that keeps most people working at a job. The fear of not paying their bills, the fear of being fired, the fear of not having enough money, and the fear of starting over. Employees often feel disappointed looking at their paychecks, especially after tax and deductions. This was 9-year-old Robert's first introduction to taxes. It's also how he learned that the rich don't let the government do that to them, even though they earn more. In a new deal, Rich Dad negotiated that Robert continues working for him, but for free. For the next 3 weeks, Robert and Mike worked for their rich dad for free. Then on the 3rd Saturday, he took them out to a park for some ice cream. He decided to introduce him to the trap of the rat race. He did this by offering to pay them 25 cents an hour. They said no. Rich Dad then offered $1 an hour. They said no. then $2 an hour. They said no. Then $5 an hour. And they once again said no. The boys knew that they couldn't be bought. They were committed to becoming wealthy. Rich Dad later pointed out that poor people often say they're not interested in money. Robert Kiyosaki thought back to the times his dad would say, "I'm not interested in money. I work because I love my job." This is how poor people often cover themselves up. It's essential to not give in to your emotions such as fear, so that you can prevent any quick reactions and think objectively about a situation. The reality is a job is merely a short-term solution to a long-term problem. Rich Dad's focus is on teaching the boys how to have a choice of thoughts instead of a knee-jerk reaction to things. One of the most empowering lessons Rich Dad taught in this section of Rich Dad Poor Dad was to keep using your brain, work for free. Soon your mind will show you ways of making money far beyond what I could ever pay you. You will see things that other people never see. Most people never see these opportunities because they're looking for money and security, so that's all they get. This lesson inspired the two boys to find a new way to make money. On one Saturday, they noticed Mrs. Martin cutting off the cover of the comic books and throwing them into a cardboard box. Since they weren't allowed to resell the comic books, they decided to create a library for a fee where other kids could come over to read as many comic books as they liked between 2:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. every day after school for only 10 cents. This deal was a bargain for the other kids who might have spent 10 cents buying a comic book. Each week they averaged around $9.50, while paying Mike's sister $1 a week to manage the library. After 3 months, a fight broke out in the library, and Mike's dad advised them to shut down the business. But they did manage to learn how to make money work for them instead of working for money. Lesson 2. Why teach financial literacy? It's not how much money you make. It's how much money you keep. Robert Kiyosaki retired at the age of 47. He still works, but for him and his wife, Kim, working is an option as their wealth will continue to grow automatically. In this section of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki shares a simple story. In 1923, the greatest leaders and richest businessmen joined together for a meeting in Chicago. 25 years later, 9 of them had their life end in the following ways. 4 died broke. 1 went insane. 2 were released from prison. 2 committed suicide. This unfortunate turn was likely due to their lives being drastically affected by the 1929 stock market crash and the Great Depression. The biggest financial lesson to learn is that it's all about how much money you keep, not how much you make. And without financial literacy, you'll lose your money soon. Growing up, Poor Dad recommended that Robert read books while Rich Dad recommended that Robert master financial literacy. Robert shares, "If you are going to build the Empire State Building, the first thing you need to do is dig a deep hole and pour a strong foundation. If you are going to build a home in the suburbs, all you need to do is pour a 6-inch slab of concrete." Most people, in their drive to get rich, are trying to build an Empire State Building on a 6-inch slab. It's vital to learn the subject of accounting if your long-term goal is to be rich, no matter how boring you think the topic is. Rule number 1. You must know the difference between an asset and a liability, and by assets. Rich people acquire assets. The poor and middle class acquire liabilities they think are assets, Rich Dad says. The biggest challenge poor people have is knowing the difference between an asset and a liability. Knowing the difference between the two can help you become rich. So what's the difference? An asset puts money into your pocket. A liability takes money out of your pocket. Assets add to your income. Liabilities add to your expenses. And the job of a poor person pays you an income that then covers your expenses. The job of a middle-class person pays you an income, then pays down liabilities, then pays expenses. However, for a rich person, their assets pay them an income. For example, their assets may give them rental income, dividends, interest, or royalties. Here are a few examples of liabilities that the middle class own: mortgage, car loans, credit card debt, school loans. Here are a few examples of assets that rich people own: real estate, stocks, bonds, notes, intellectual property. Many people who are poor or in the middle class often say, "I'm in debt, so I need to make more money." However, getting money isn't a problem. It's the lack of financial literacy that's the problem. So if they simply had more money, the problem might become worse. That's why when people win the lottery or get a pay raise, they usually end up back in the same financial situation as they did before. If a person spends all they have, the pattern will continue every time they make money. Professional success isn't directly tied to academic success anymore. Most students leave their schools with limited financial literacy. Later in life, they find themselves struggling financially. What they need to know more than how to make money is how to manage their money. This skill is called financial aptitude. Most people learned how to work hard instead of how to make money work hard for them. Taxes end up costing the poor and middle class in the long run. People often buy bigger homes to grow a family, and property tax rises. People's salaries increase over time, and so Social Security tax also sees a rise. And before long, their liabilities column is filled up with a mortgage and credit card debt, thus trapping them in the rat race. The secret to knowing how to make money is simply about creating assets instead of liabilities. Golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. Most financial problems are caused by trying to keep up with the Joneses. You might choose to buy a bigger house, work harder, or get a promotion or pay raise. As teenagers, Mike and Robert would work with their rich dad. They studied how he held meetings with his bankers, attorneys, accountants, investors, so forth. Even though his rich dad had left school at 13, he was now directing some very educated people. Rich Dad regularly told the two teens, "An intelligent person hires people who are more intelligent than he is." As a teenager, Robert realized he had more financial literacy than his poor dad, as he was able to keep books and spent a lot of time listening to bankers, tax accountants, real estate brokers, and others like them. In this section of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki shares that many people view their home as an asset. However, in many cases, the value of a home doesn't always go up. Sometimes people buy million-dollar houses that would sell for far less. Retirees such as Kim's parents had a strain on their budget when their property taxes increased to $1,000 a month. When Robert plans on buying a bigger house, he first buys assets that will generate the cash flow to pay for the house. He shares that as you continue to grow your asset column, over time, you'll also see the growth of your income. And that's why the rich keep getting richer. However, the reason why the middle class struggles are because taxes increase as their salaries increase. Employees work for three key groups: company, making the owners and shareholders rich; government, possibly 100% of the work you do from January until May goes towards taxes; bank, your biggest expenses are your mortgage and credit card debt. Wealth is a person's ability to survive so many number of days forward. Or, if I stopped working today, how long could I survive? For example, if a person has $1,000 a month in cash flow from their asset column, and they have monthly expenses of $2,000 a month, they will only be wealthy once they have $2,000 a month of cash flow to their asset column. The average American only has less than $400 in savings, with an astounding 34% with none at all. So to sum up, the rich buy assets, the poor only have expenses, the middle class buy liabilities they think are assets. Lesson 3. Mind your own business. The rich focus on their asset columns, while everyone else focuses on their income statements. While most people assume that Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, is in the hamburger business, Kroc once told an MBA class that he's actually in the real estate business. That's why he carefully chose every location for his franchises. Today, McDonald's owns more real estate than any other organization in the world, even the Catholic Church. When someone asks the average person, "What is your business?" they typically respond with their profession. However, they are not owners of the company they work for. They still need their own business. Otherwise, they'll spend their life working for everyone but themselves. That's the importance of minding your own business. Financial hardship comes from spending your life putting money into someone else's pocket instead of your own. But by working for others, they'll be dependent on pay raises, getting second jobs, or working overtime. Without a financial foundation, you'll be stuck to your job and its security for the rest of your life. However, it's important to note that entrepreneurship can be a tricky path. In one instance, Robert Kiyosaki tried to get a loan. The loan committee saw that he owned a lot of real estate properties. However, they struggled to understand why he didn't have a salary or a 9-to-5 job. Even though, at the time, he did own many assets such as Armani suits, art, golf clubs, and of course property. It's also good to note that as you sell your assets, the government taxes you on the gains. Robert recommends to keep your expenses low, reduce liabilities, and diligently build a base of solid assets. If you have children, Advise them to build assets before they move out or fall into the trap of the rat race. Here are a few more assets that Robert recommends that you or your children acquire. Businesses that do not require my presence. I own them, but they are not managed or run by other people. If I have to work there, it's not a business. It becomes my job. Stocks, bonds, income-generating real estate. Notes use. Royalties from intellectual property such as music, scripts, and patents. Anything else that has value, produces income, or appreciates and has a ready market. Rich Dad used to say, if you don't love it, you won't take care of it. You can keep your day job, but you should also start buying assets like those listed above. Since 90% of companies fail, Robert Kiyosaki's goal is to sell the entire stock of a company within a year of going public. To become rich, you'll need to buy luxuries last. People who buy luxuries first are often in much debt. The aim is to build income-generating assets that can buy luxuries. Lesson 4. The history of taxes and the power of corporations. My rich dad just played the game smart, and he did it through corporations, the biggest secret of the rich. The poor often say, why don't the rich pay for it? Or the rich should pay more in taxes and give it to the poor. However, the real rich never pay taxes. The people who pay taxes are the educated middle class. While poor dad knew the history of education, rich dad knew the history of taxes. Taxes originated in England and America temporarily to pay for wars. It wasn't until 1874 when England permanently added income taxes as a requirement of its citizens. It started in 1913 for Americans. An interesting tidbit about taxes is that it was initially only for the rich to pay. That's what governments told the poor and middle class to help get them on board with the idea. That was how it got voted into law in the first place. Poor dad. Paid to spend money and hire people. Government gains respect the bigger it gets. Rich dad. Gains respect of investor by spending and hiring less. Poor dad. The rich are greedy crooks. Rich dad. The government are lazy thieves. The rich don't get taxed as tax laws help them to create jobs and provide housing. Thus, the government is dependent on the middle class for their tax revenue. The rich put their money into a corporation. Their asset puts income into their corporation, and then corporate income can be used as income for their personal income statement. And the expenses from their personal income statement can go into the expenses for the corporation. Even though the masses continuously try to find ways to tax the rich consistently outsmart them. Something to remember about the government is that if they don't spend their allotted funds, they'll risk losing money when the next budget is announced. They aren't rewarded for being efficient spenders. Yet, entrepreneurs are rewarded for financial efficiency. The mindsets between the two are polar opposite. The rich look for legal loopholes to avoid paying taxes. That's why they often hire the smartest accountants and attorneys. In real estate, Robert Kiyosaki uses one of these legal loopholes as well. There's a section called 1031 in the Internal Revenue Code that allows a seller to delay the payment of taxes in W when they sell real estate, provided that they buy a more expensive piece of real estate. Thus, by consistently trading up, he delays getting taxed until the time comes to liquidate. This strategy also allows him to continue building his asset column. Knowing the law can help save you money, while also making sure you follow it. Poor dad. Climb the corporate ladder. Rich dad. Own the corporate ladder. When Robert was in his mid-20s working for Xerox, he realized how disappointing it was to look at his paycheck. His bosses would talk to him about promotions and pay raises. However, that only made him see his deductions rise too. He could see himself becoming his poor dad. This realization is what made him realize he needed to follow his rich dad's path. So Robert turned to minding his business by building out his asset column, so he could invest in Hawaii's real estate market. This newfound motivation made him work harder at selling Xerox machines at work. He knew he was building something bigger than himself. After 3 years of hard work, his real estate business was making more than he was at Xerox. His company bought him his first Porsche. His coworkers had no idea that he wasn't spending his commissions on the Porsche but assets. Financial IQ is made up of 4 key areas: accounting, ability to read numbers; investing, the concept of money making money; understanding markets; knowing supply and demand; the law; knowing the tax advantages and protections your corporation can provide. Tax advantages. Corporations can pay expenses before taxes, which employees can't do. A corporation can spend everything it can and be taxed only on everything left over. You can expense car payments, insurance, repairs, health club memberships, and most restaurant meals. Protection from lawsuits. The rich use corporations to protect their assets from creditors, whereas the poor and middle class try to own everything themselves. Lesson 5. The rich invent money. Often in the real world, it's not the smart who get ahead, but the bold. When companies downsize, employees often blame the owners for being unfair. In a news story he saw, Robert Kiyosaki shares, a terminated manager of about 45 years of age had his wife and 2 babies at the plant and was begging the guards to let him talk to the owners to ask if they would reconsider his termination. He had just bought a house and was afraid of losing it. Inside of us is both someone brave and someone who will get on their knees and beg. However, when we're so afraid that we start doubting ourselves, we fail to push forward. Instead, it's the bold who get ahead. Aim to convert your fear into power. The result of gaining financial literacy and taking risks is having more options. In the future, we'll be seeing a rise in successful companies being created, but also a surge in companies failing, downsizing and laying off employees. It's better to be making millions from the assets you build than aiming to get a raise. This period is a great era to be building assets. Wealth over the years. 300 years ago, the person who owns land. Later, the person who owns factories and production. Today, the person with the most timely information. The players who get out of the rat race the quickest are the people who understand numbers and have creative financial minds. It is possible to have the money yet still struggle to move ahead financially. Some people have a great opportunity present itself only to fail to have enough money to take advantage of it. Others have a fantastic opportunity present itself only to lack the ability to recognize that it's a great opportunity, and they may even have the money to take advantage. The strategy of the average person is work hard, save, and borrow. But instead of working hard, they should aim to improve their financial intelligence so that they can make more money. The people who get rich the fastest are those who realize that money isn't real. The single most powerful asset we all have is our mind. If it is trained well, it can create enormous wealth. Today, savers are considered losers. The reason for this is because interest rates have never been lower. Plus, banks now charge you for holding your money. During the stock market crash, Robert Kiyosaki was short of cash as he had his money in the stock market and apartment houses. However, he knew this was the time to buy. He and his wife had about $1 million to invest in some amazing deals. He decided to shop for houses at the bankruptcy attorney's office. He asked a friend for a $2,000 loan with a return of $200, so he could buy a $20,000 home that was worth about $75,000. He then ran an ad promoting the house for $60,000. It sold within minutes. He asked for a $2,500 processing fee, thus giving his friend his money back without using any of his own money, thus earning him a profit of $40,000 with a promissory note. The whole process took him 5 hours. At the time Rich Dad Poor Dad was published, there had been 3 stock market crashes in 30 years. 1989 to 1990. Real estate. 2001 to 2002. Dot-com bubble burst. 2008 to 2009. Housing bubble burst. All of these stock market crashes were investment opportunities. Which one sounds harder? Work hard. Pay 50% in taxes. Save what is left. Your savings earn 5%, which is also taxed. Or, take the time to develop your financial intelligence. Harness the power of your brain and asset column. Most of Robert Kiyosaki's financial growth comes from real estate and small cap stocks. The problem with secure investments is that they are often sanitized, that is, made so safe that the gains are less. In one example, Robert Kiyosaki paid $45,000 on the house worth $65,000 that the owner was struggling to sell. The first year he rented it out to a local professor, and after expenses he nets $40 a month. However, a year later when the market picked back up, he sold it for $95,000. Since he had used the money to buy a bigger property, a 12-unit apartment, he was able to defer the payment of capital gains. He spent $300,000 on the apartment, and only 2 short years later sold it for $495,000 and bought a 30-unit apartment building with a cash flow of $5,000 a month. A few years later, he sold it for $1.2 million. The best deals aren't usually offered to newcomers. They're often reserved for the rich. But the more sophisticated you get at the game, the more opportunities you'll be presented with. Most of Robert Kiyosaki's millions started with as little as $5,000 or $10,000 investments. In the past, Robert has bought 100,000 shares at 25 cents a share before a company goes public. Then the company goes public, and whether it's $2 each or if it flies to $20, you can sometimes make $1 million in less than a year. It's not gambling if you know what you're doing. It's gambling if you're just throwing money into a deal and praying. Robert Kiyosaki shares. Most people never win because they're more afraid of losing. That is why I found school so silly. In school, we learn that mistakes are bad, and we are punished for making them. Yet if you look at the way humans are designed to learn, we learn by making mistakes. We learn to walk by falling down. If we never fell down, we would never walk. People's fear of losing causes them to not be rich. People who avoid failure also avoid success. Lesson 6. Work to learn, don't work for money. Job security meant everything to my educated dad. Learning meant everything to my rich dad. During an interview with a journalist, Robert Kiyosaki learned that the journalists strive to become a best-selling author. He realized she was a great writer and that she should pursue that. She told him that she had tried, but no one was interested. He accidentally offended her when he told her to take a sales course so she could promote herself. She became defensive. She replied, "I have a master's degree in English literature. Why would I go to school to learn to be a salesperson? I am a professional. I went to school to be trained in a profession so I would not have to be a salesperson. I hate salespeople. All they want is money." She packed her things. Robert Kiyosaki gently pointed out that he was the best-selling author, not the best-writing author. This statement only infuriated her more. And the interview ended. The world has many successful and talented people. Doctors, lawyers, dentists. And still they struggle financially. But as a wise business consultant once said, they are one skill away from great wealth. If you took your skill set and paired it with financial intelligence, accounting, investing, marketing, or law, you could achieve great wealth. If that journalist had instead picked up a job at an ad agency to learn how to sell, she could go on to create great wealth with her writing. Rich Dad says, you want to know a little bit about a lot. In school and at work, you're expected to specialize. Those who earn promotions tend to be specialists. However, Robert Kiyosaki's rich dad always recommended the opposite. That's why, throughout the years, Robert would work in different areas of his rich dad's company. He was expected to attend meetings with lawyers, bankers, accountants. It was essential to the rich dad for Robert to know every aspect of creating an empire. When Robert Kiyosaki had quit his high-paying job, his poor dad had a heart-to-heart talk with him, failing to understand his mindset for quitting. Poor dad values job security. Rich dad values learning. Poor dad assumed Robert went to school to learn how to be a ship's officer. Rich dad knew Robert went there to study international trade. The reason Robert had quit his job was so that he could learn how to lead people, as his rich dad said. If you're not a good leader, you'll get shot in the back, just like they do in business. JOB is an acronym for just over broke. Robert Kiyosaki recommends taking on jobs where you can learn new skills instead of jobs that pay the most. The biggest fear for aging Americans is running out of money before they die. When you add up health costs and long-term nursing home care, it's quite likely that the average American will run out of money during their retirement. Are workers looking into the future or just until their next paycheck, never questioning where they are headed? The best advice Robert Kiyosaki has for those looking to earn more money is to pick up a second job that'll teach them a second skill. It's normal to feel a bit of resistance to that idea. You might not be excited to do something you aren't passionate about. But remember, you go to the gym not because you want to, but because you want to be healthy and live a long life. Robert shares the story of an artist in Hawaii who inherited $35,000. He used the money to run ads in an expensive magazine that targeted the rich. However, not a single person reached out. He lost his entire savings. The artist is now trying to sue the magazine for misrepresentation. However, the reality is that he didn't have any advertising experience. When Robert asked this artist if he'd be interested in taking a course, he said, "I don't have the time and I don't want to waste my money." Most people focus on improving their product rather than learning how to sell it. Management skills needed for success. Management of cash flow. Management of systems. Management of people. The most important specialized skills are sales and marketing. Robert Kiyosaki's friend Blair Singer shares, sales equals income. Your ability to sell, to communicate and position your strengths directly impacts your success. Most people fear rejection, which is why they're often intimidated by sales and marketing. Law of money. Give and you shall receive. Robert shares, in conclusion, I became both dads. One part of me is a hardcore capitalist who loves the game of making money. The other part is a socially responsible teacher who is deeply concerned with this ever-widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. I personally hold the archaic education system, primarily responsible for this growing gap. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so as well. Together, you can help us reach 20,000 subscribers. I can count on your support. If you've already subscribed, please leave a comment stating that you have done so. Thank you. Now that you have, let's move on. Lesson 7. Overcoming obstacles. The primary difference between a rich person and a poor person is how they manage fear. There are 5 core reasons why even the financially literate don't become financially independent. Fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, arrogance. Not even the rich like losing money. No one does really. Rich Dad says, some people are terrified of snakes. Some people are terrified of losing money. Both are phobias. That's why it was so crucial for Robert's rich dad to teach his 2 sons how to take risks at a young age. The younger you are, the easier it is to become rich. Approach risk like a Texan. Texans both win big and lose big. Their attitude is what's game-changing. They feel a sense of pride when they win, but they still brag even if they lose. They lack a fear of loss. Their loss inspires them. Before you win, you lose. Like all those times you fell off a bicycle before you learned how to ride it. Before people became rich, they lost money. Most people are more afraid of the pain of losing money than the happiness of becoming rich. Rich Dad knew that failure would only make him stronger and smarter. Losers are defeated by loss. Winners are inspired by loss. You can still hate losing without being afraid of it. Most people invest in low-yield mutual funds because it's the safe thing to do. But that's not the portfolio of a winner. To be successful, you'll need to be focused instead of balanced. Focus. Follow one course until successful. Don't let doubt cause you not to act. Avoid remarks from friends and family such as, "What makes you think you can do that? If it's such a good idea, how come someone else hasn't done it? That will never work. You don't know what you're talking about." Investors know that when it's a period of doom and gloom, that's the best time to make money. Robert's friend Richard recently asked him for advice on buying property. The two of them identified a 2-bedroom townhouse for only $42,000. Others at the time were selling for $65,000. He bought it. But after talking to a neighbor, he backed out, thinking he got a bad deal. A short few years later, the property was worth $95,000. And Richard's small investment of $5,000 could have helped him get out of the rat race. Doubt can be a deal killer. When it comes to financial education, you need to know the difference between good debt and bad debt. Analyze instead of criticizing. Most people say they're too busy to focus on their wealth and health, but really they're avoiding it. Rich Dad believed the words, "I can't afford it," shut down your brain. How can I afford it? Opens up possibilities, excitement, and dreams. Instead of buying his kids everything they wanted, Rich Dad asked them to think about how they can afford it. Rich Dad never gave Robert or Mike anything. The boys had to pay for college on their own. The financial struggle often comes from bad habits. You need to pay yourself first. Otherwise, you likely won't be left with anything after paying your bills. That's because if you pay yourself first and fail to have enough money left over for bills, you'll need to find new ways to earn more money. It becomes a motivator, especially when debt collectors start calling. What I know makes me money. What I don't know loses me money. Final thoughts. Robert's friend was once trying to save up for his 4 children's college educations, but with only $12,000. It was clear it wasn't going to happen anytime soon. He advised his friend to buy a property in Phoenix since there was a slump in the market. After 2 weeks, they found a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home in a good area. The homeowner was desperate to sell. They ended up buying the property for $79,000, even though the owner wanted $102,000. His friend needed a down payment of $7,900. Each month after all expenses were paid, his friend pocketed $125. He planned to keep the house for 12 years. He used his $125 to pay down the mortgage even faster. 3 years later, someone offered him $156,000 for the house. Robert advised him to sell it using a 1031 tax-deferred exchange. Next, he bought a mini storage facility. After 3 months, he was making $1,000 a month that he put into the college fund. A couple of years later, he sold that mini warehouse for close to $330,000. His next investment made him $3,000 a month in income, going back to the college fund. The man now feels confident in his ability to pay for his children's college education. And it all started with only $7,900. There are 3 types of income: ordinary earned, portfolio, passive. Poor dad. Ordinary earned get a safe and secure job. Rich dad. Portfolio and passive make money work for you. The key to financial freedom and great wealth is a person's ability to convert earned income into passive and/or portfolio income. Warren Buffett advises that risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. Rich dad would often say, if you want to be rich, you must know what kind of income to work hard for, how to keep it, and how to protect it from loss. That is the key to great wealth. If you do not understand the differences in those 3 incomes, and do not learn the skills on how to acquire and protect those incomes, you will probably spend your life earning less than you could and working harder than you should. As a token of appreciation, drop a comment saying, I watched the video till the very end. When I see this comment, I'll give you a heart. To ensure your success, take these 3 important steps. 1. Like this video. 2. Subscribe to this channel. 3. Turn on the notification bell. Your destiny relies on how you spend your money and your time. Your family's future will be determined by your choices today. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more inspiring content on our channel. Until next time, happy entrepreneuring.